Might ask, how does a mechanic get to fly airplanes? Have you ever wondered what goes on at your local flight school? Say, for example, you have an airplane that's broken. Something's not running right on it, or a pilot reports a problem with it. The mechanic that can also fly the airplane generally is the guy that has to go take that airplane out and find any of the gremlins. And doing that, I got a lot of flight experience over the years. Believe it or not, my first inkling that I wanted to be in aviation was the very first time I flew. As a matter of fact, it was the first memory I ever have as a young child. 3 years old, boarding a United Airlines flight, and it was an old DC-8. Had anybody ever seen a picture of a DC-8 before? They were a narrow-body aircraft, 4 jet engines on them, kind of like a miniature 747. But I remember being the most enthralled 3-year-old, peeking my head out the window, and what sold it for me was realizing we're above a layer of clouds. And I saw all the little clouds and the light. And even at that age, I knew I needed to have aviation as a part of who I am. Who here has heard of Oshkosh before? Everybody has. So Oshkosh is the world's largest fly-in. Every year, 12,000 airplanes and almost 700,000 people come together to share their love of aviation. Well, I grew up with that right in my backyard. Figuratively speaking, I was about an hour away from Oshkosh, but every year, from the time I was 3-4 years old to the current day, I have been at Oshkosh. My father thought it very valuable that I be exposed to aviation, that he keep me around it, and Oshkosh really had a big impact on that, right? When you see that many airplanes and that many people that are passionate about aviation, it becomes normal to you, right? Palmyra was not a town that was necessarily rich and had a lot of money. They had a lumber yard, they had farms, a couple manufacturing jobs, but by and large, it didn't have the economic power that the DFW Metroplex had. So there was always an old guy with an airplane for rent for less than $50 an hour. As a matter of fact, 2013 rolls around and I got my private pilot license. How much do you think it cost me to get all the way through my private?
I agree.
Less. Any other guesses?
3,500.
Less. You're actually really close. So including my medical, check ride, the training, and my instructor, it's $2,800, right? Now, this guy was never making any money on the aircraft, and nor was it anything to write home about, right? I wish I still had a picture of this plane because it had pieces of paint chipped off of it. You know, the seat had a big old tear in it. But was it airworthy? Was it a safe aircraft? Absolutely. But the people that flew this aircraft had a different mentality. Everybody chipped in towards making this airplane airworthy, keeping it clean, and chipping in a little bit when it came time to do the annual. Anybody ever hear of an owner-assisted annual? So every aircraft requires its annual inspection. Every year, a mechanic holding an inspection authorization has to say, you know what, this aircraft's in good shape, it's good to fly. And so you open all the panels, you check the engine over, change the oil, do the spark plugs. Everybody would take a part in maintaining this airplane, and it really made aviation more affordable and accessible to the community. It wasn't that somebody was just giving away time in an airplane, no. Some of the guys, the guy that owned the airplane, he would tell people go in and sweep the hangar. And everybody would listen to him because it was chipping in and giving back to the community. So that is how I was able to get into it. I definitely did not come from a lot of money, and I had to do it all on my own. This airport and the connections I had there made it possible. So that got the passion going in me, right? You guys are exposed to aviation each and every day. You're sitting in class, you're wearing shirts with an eagle on it, right? But you're learning about aviation as a principal focus of your high school education. So you're in a community that is that immersive. How many people in this room are not going to go on to work a job in aviation? Everybody here is going to. It's what drew you here in the first place, was that hunger to have a community in aviation, right? So when you're immersed in it, it becomes normal, it becomes who you are. Same thing happened to me. Well, I stumbled around a little bit in my life. You know, young men, we're hot-headed. 18 to 24 years old, I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I didn't pursue aviation. I bounced place to place to place. As a matter of fact, my first job was driving a truck. I went from driving a truck to managing a cell phone store, but that sense of community, aviation, it always brought me back. I wanted more. I wanted to be able to get into it. I saved up every penny I could, and with the help of that local community and the aviation culture there, was able to become a private pilot, and did so in a relatively short period of time. Literally 2 months. On my weekends, while I was still working a full-time job. Well, I got a phone call about halfway through my private pilot training. Anybody know the minimum number of hours required to be a private pilot?
Is it 40?
40 is absolutely correct. I had just over 20 hours. I had soloed already, and I'm in the hangar with, his name's Don Agan. He was the gentleman who owned the airplane. I get a call saying I was laid off. You know what he tells me? Forget all that. Pull that aircraft back out of the hangar and go fly. I'm like, sir, I don't have any money to be able to give you. It's like, it doesn't matter, you pay me back when you can. I finished up 2 weeks after that. He footed the bill for me to get through the private, and I paid him back every dime. It took 8 months, but he pushed me to the finish line. What I didn't know about this man is that it would be his final year on Earth. The same man that taught my father how to fly, that taught most of the students I went to school with how to fly. He passed away later that year due to stage 4 bone cancer. But he left a legacy on that local airport. To this day, the aircraft he owned is still available for rent. Even in 2026, what do you think they rent this airplane for? With inflation and all.
$100 an hour?
Nope. Still only $65 an hour to try to keep it affordable to the local community, yes.
What kind of aircraft is it?
Cessna 150. And it's a beater. But does it have to be the prettiest airplane in the world to be airworthy? At the end of the day, when you're in the air, an airplane is an airplane, right? As long as it's not corroded, as long as the engine's running good, it doesn't have to be the prettiest. Ended up getting my private pilot license 2013, and I immediately went to A&P school after that. Now you might ask, why didn't I just go on the airline track? Why didn't I go to flight school, finish my instrument, get my commercial? But for me, it just wasn't an option, right? My parents weren't around to be able to co-sign a loan, and being a young man, I had no other choice. Meanwhile, A&P school was much more affordable. And some of you guys that are doing your generals right now, I'm going to tell you that is a huge head start, right? Because on the tail end of this, you come out 6 months and you can have a full A&P license. But it is a lot, don't want to say easier avenue, but it's a much more affordable avenue to be able to get in. So I was able to use federal student loans. I attended a 2-year program at Fox Valley Technical College and achieved my A&P. While going through school, I did fly a little bit, enough to be able to stay current and proficient. It's 2 words you're going to hear quite a bit, right? Those going through flight, have you ever heard of the concept of currency and proficiency? Right? What is the difference?
One's legal, one's safe.
Bingo. One's legal, one's safe. So I actually reached a point in my A&P schooling where I parked flying because I realized I wasn't flying enough to be able to stay proficient. Was I legally current? Yes. But was it smart to keep flying? No. It didn't matter much because at the end of college, I came down here to Texas. And I actually got my first job. So my first job was working as an A&P mechanic. It didn't take 2 weeks of me being there for my director of maintenance to come to me and say, I need you to get current. I'm going to send you with the CFI, get your biennial flight review done, and we're going to get you back in the air. And boy, was that the best thing that ever happened. So after you put a new engine on an airplane, and you go to start it for the first time, what do you have to do before it's free to go fly for everyone else in a flight school? You have to break that engine in, right? You have brand new pistons, brand new rings and cylinders. You have replaced components in the valve train that have never run in that engine before. So you want somebody with experience, especially with a good mechanical background, to go fly it. And boy, I got a lot of flight time doing that. Hundreds of hours within my first year and a half of being an A&P mechanic, all because I was able to fly the airplane and I understood the mechanics of what was going on. Well, this continued forward a couple years. Into my career, I got promoted to director of maintenance myself at a different flight school and was in charge of teams of mechanics and a fleet of 125 aircraft. If you have 125 aircraft in a flight school, you've got a lot of engines going on there. You're also having to go out and recover airplanes when they break down. And before you knew it, I had a ton of flight time, none of which I had paid, but I didn't have the licenses to go with it. So once again, I took everything as an opportunity. Say, for example, I had an engine to go break in. I'd grab a CFI, and I would trade him lunch for giving me a couple hours of dual doing an engine break-in flight. Kind of resourceful, right? After school, I had an engine break-in flight, plus I had 2 troubleshooting flights, and then just 1 flight to prepare for the check ride. Next thing you know, in the matter of just 3 months, I had my CFI. I had my commercial done. I had built up time flying multi. As a matter of fact, by that point, I got to fly my first jet. So that energized me a little bit. I said, you know what, we're going to take a look to see if I can follow out this dream I had of when I was a kid, flying professionally. And I ended up searching everywhere for a CFI job. Well, what's the problem with being a CFI and an aircraft mechanic? I come to a prospective employer, right? I'm looking for work. He picks up my resume and goes, man, director of maintenance, A&P mechanic. And he starts thinking about the needs of his company, his organization, right? When you guys one day go out into the workforce, it is going to become about what you can do for a company, right? And he looks at my resume and gets through the bullet points and goes, I know you applied for this CFI job, but what I really need is a director of maintenance, right? And director of maintenance is not a bad job title. Anybody want to take a guess how much a director of maintenance at a flight school will make?
I would say 100K a year.
Any other guesses? Back there, my man.
$30 an hour.
What are you
I
guessing?
was going to say $45 to $50 an hour.
Any guesses over here? As director of maintenance, I was making $155,000 a year. Works out to about $75 per hour. That's if I had no overtime, right? Plus healthcare, plus benefits. So on one hand, I could be making all that kind of money for the experience I gained as a mechanic, and I will tell you this. In terms of demand in aviation, the demand for pilots is here. It is elevated, but the demand for mechanics is through the roof, especially those with drive, mechanical aptitude, and leadership abilities. You will do very, very well. So I had this choice in front of me that every time I'd come for an interview, they would always want me to run the maintenance shop instead. The only thing that got me out of that was thinking outside the box. So, first thing I did, I said, you know what? I'm innovative enough. I know how to work on airplanes. I also know how to fly them. What is the perfect business? And I would do stuff like this. I would buy an old airplane that was beat up, neglected, abandoned at an airport, and I restored it all the way to the ground up. This airplane, when I first bought it, had been neglected and abandoned on the ramp at the airport I bought it at for 10 years. It's covered in bird droppings, the tires were flat, the struts were collapsed, and it smelled awful. Horrible. I spent a week and a half taking this airplane apart in a hangar I had found at the airport. Got it flying within a week and a half. Did a couple test flights, it was feeling good. Flew it down here, started tearing the airplane apart. Did all the interior work, address corrosion, started making upgrades to the panel. Then did a paint job on it. At the end of the day, I ended up with a beautiful airplane, right? So, how many here know anything about doing business? How do you make money in business, right? Go from
Recent trends, I guess. I don't know, like just being able to connect with people.
to be able to have a good service, something you can provide that you add value to. That is the core of any business, right? So an airplane like this I was able to buy for $25,000. And I put a lot of work into it. I had about 200 hours of labor invested into fixing this aircraft up, along with an additional $20,000 into fixing it in terms of parts, upgrades. I sold this aircraft for $119,000. So really, this work I was able to get done in just over a month. That's a lot of money to be able to make in a month off an airplane, right? And so I repeated the cycle a couple times. I did this once, twice. Next thing you know, I had 3 aircraft parked in a hangar at once. Well, I was doing really good at it until I bought a Beechcraft Bonanza. Anybody know what a Beechcraft Bonanza is? What does Beechcraft really stand for? How about this? Anybody ever heard of the expression in terms of boats, what boat really stands for? Bust out another 1,000. Well, for Beechcraft, that same terminology applies. This aircraft, I had bought it. It had been abandoned in Florida in a hangar. And, well, unfortunately, it was disassembled. So I had piles of parts here. I had a tail over here. I had an engine here. I had no prop. And I get this aircraft all the way put back together. Several trips out to Florida to get it back in flying condition. And I'm feeling good. I start the engine. It's running. It's ready to go. So I say, you know what? The next step in this, let's put some gas in the airplane and go do a high-speed taxi. Make sure everything feels good before I try to fly this plane that hadn't flown in over 20 years. High-speed taxi goes great until I pull back up to the fuel pump to put more fuel in it to go fly. And there is fuel pouring out of the wings. Anybody heard of a fuel bladder before? It's a bag that they place inside the wings of the aircraft that's made of rubber and cloth. And this bag started cracking and leaking fuel because it had sat so long. Well, they're also very difficult parts to get. Almost 2 years. From the time I bought this aircraft to the time I finally got the bladders in and got it sold. In that time, I lost all my money. I was down on my luck. Story of failure, right? Everybody always talks about the successes and wins, but this knocked me down hard. The financial cost of having all my money tied up in this airplane, being unable to sell it. On the heels of a failed business, I had a little bit different opportunity. I decided to head north. I said, you know what, if I've got just enough money for a plane ticket to Alaska or the gas to be able to drive up there, if anywhere in the world was going to offer a good opportunity for somebody who's a mechanic and a pilot, it's going to be Alaska. The vast majority of the state is unconnected. Therefore, the people living in the remote villages, to get their milk, to get their food, to get medicine, it's all brought in on an airplane. I figured, you know what? What better place for a guy that can fix the airplane and fly it? So I loaded everything I had into the back of my car, drove up there. One of the best decisions I ever made. Within a week of getting up there, I got my big break, a CFI position. Not part-time, it was a full-time job. As a matter of fact, within a month of being there, I was flying more than 100 hours a month. So I was accumulating flight time really fast, right? 100 hours a month is more than typical. At Thrust, our instructors average about 50 to 60 hours a month of flight experience. So at 100 hours a month, I could get to that airline requirement really quick. I was racking it up great. It was awesome. This was my first student I got through rating. Got him through his instrument and his commercial, and eventually his CFI rating. And I'll tell you, Alaska offers some of the most beautiful, stunning scenery on Earth. So when you're learning to fly in Alaska, a lot of other variables, right? You're flying over bears, you're flying over inhospitable terrain. You have to bring fire starters. You have to bring an axe, some rope. It's required by law in the state of Alaska. As a matter of fact, I don't know anybody that would fly an airplane that far without being able to hunt, fish, have all that capability with them. And you had to teach your students that. More importantly, though, the flying was really cool, right? There are only so many paved runways in the state of Alaska. So instead of doing your private pilot training on this beautiful 7,000-foot runway we have out there, you're doing it on a 1,500-foot gravel bar. Even in a 172. In Alaska, they put the big old tires on the planes, right? Anybody ever seen those? It helps you land on rocky or uneven terrain by cushioning the blow of the airplane when it lands. Likewise, we also had skis for the airplanes. I've landed on glaciers. I've landed on riverbanks. One of my first lessons with the student when we're doing takeoff and landings would be to go land on the glacial lake in front of this glacier. So if you look off to the left of this glacier, you see how it's kind of flat out there? Like all this ridges and then there's kind of a flat spot of ice. I would take my students out there to the face of the glacier and make them land the... So after that wonderful time flying Alaska, I got a lot of flight experience very quickly. Anybody ever heard of a Part 135 operation? What is it? Charter, right? Somebody says we're going to charter out an outfit or we're going to have regularly scheduled passenger service. Well, my resume having an A&P and now having 600 hours of Alaska flight experience behind my belt definitely gained a little bit of notoriety within, certain circles, one of them being the caravan community. What's Cessna Caravan? Anybody ever heard of those? They're cool airplanes. This is Cessna Caravan. It's 10-seat, turboprop-powered Cessna airplane. Think of it like the Alaska pickup truck. Well, I was hired to be captain on the Caravan down in the Caribbean. So I didn't come straight back to Texas. Instead, I got a really cool job offer, and it was March of that year, and boy, I tell you, it was cold in Alaska in March. I'd just flown up there all winter, and I got a job offer to be captain on the Caravan down in the Caribbean. And they were like, can you be ready in a week and a half to go to Indoc? Anybody know what Indoc is? Indoctrination is the first step of getting hired at any airline, any charter operation, is you learn all about the company, all about their operating procedures, the manuals, the policies, and ultimately how to fly the aircraft. Well, flying the aircraft's easy, right? Cessna does a wonderful job in designing their aircraft, so this big old thing handles like a really big 172. So I had no problem learning to fly it. As a matter of fact, 2.5 hours sitting in the left seat of this thing, I was checked out to be captain on it already. And we didn't do training in a simulator, we did training right in the aircraft. Well, I'll tell you, when you're flying something that big and you're doing stalls in something that big, boy, I tell you, you get a workout, right? It was fun to get to fly that airplane every day. Down in the Caribbean, my daily routine was to start in St. Croix for the day. So we do island hopping flights, and I didn't have a co-pilot, it was single pilot operations. I would do 10 to 15 legs a day, meaning 10 to 15 distinct flights going island to island, be it to Puerto Rico, be it to St. Thomas, be it to the British Virgin Islands or St. Martin. Now, true Av geeks are going to know St. Martin. You ever seen that sandy beach where they've got buildings on both sides and then they have the runway going right in front of the beach? And people stand behind the aircraft as they're throttling up and get blasted with sand. Really cool. If you've never looked it up on YouTube. That was one of my regular destinations. It was great flying there. But once again, adversity kind of kicks in. My paycheck didn't show up. Then the next paycheck didn't show up. And then the nice old company housing they told us we had, they took away and still wanted us to fly. Well, there's an important lesson. Never let an employer walk over you. Remember, your time is worth something. Your skills are worth something. Don't let anybody get you to give you your time for free. So I ended up boarding a plane and getting off the island. That is how I ended up in front of you guys today. Got a wide range of experience, but it's a bounce back beautifully, right? A year of flying in Alaska, I flew the Caravan, it was great. Several months it fell apart, but it wasn't the end of my road. Despite the challenges, it was time for me to try harder than ever. One thing that I had to put in here is something I've been told a lot. A door that closes is not an obstacle, just a sign to try a new path, right? The beautiful part about being an aircraft mechanic and a pilot is I've got ways to bounce back and forth. I discovered a little bit of a passion, a new love, if you will. In the meantime, while I was waiting for a class date, which was over a year-long wait, I stumbled upon this job, teaching people how to become aircraft mechanics. And I tell you what, it became a little bit of a passion. I still get to fly. As a matter of fact, I'm turning A&Ps into pilots. It's kind of fun. I teach them all day in class, and then we wrap up with project or task on the airplane, and it's Friday afternoon, and I'll take my students, load them in an airplane, and we'll go fly it. As an exposure, this gentleman right here, Mikey, 23 years old, kind of young, kind of hot-headed. This flight right here is his first time ever being on an airplane. That experience permanently changed him. He works currently for American Airlines as a baggage handler, the guy that loads up all the bags and drives all the little carts around the ramp. He came to me after this flight and said, I'm not going that way. I'm going to general aviation. Last I heard, he's resigning from American next month in order to be able to get a job in general aviation, so he'll have opportunities to be able to fly and learn more. I'll tell you what, it's the differences I made in guys like that that have convinced me I'm going to be a teacher as long as humanly possible here. But it's not where I would have gone. I invested a lot of time to become a pilot, but I'll tell you what, it's the mechanic skills that bridge the gap. Even though you would think a mechanic never flies, how many times have I flown this month? How many hours did I log this month? Anybody want to take a guess? I've logged 24 flight hours in the last month. It's enough to stay current. It's enough to stay proficient like we're talking about, but that isn't even my job. My job is working with students, teaching them how to be aircraft mechanics, and the opportunities to fly will always follow. So you guys, as you're looking at this, as aviation as a career, whether you're a pilot or even a mechanic, having that backup option oftentimes can be the difference between feast and famine.